We've been covering here this week the pluses and many minuses of the Democratic relief bill that has been proposed now for the House. And we've also been tracking what progressives might do. They've been unhappy since some of their priorities were pointedly not included in that bill. And we actually have some new reporting on that front this morning.
That's right. New reporting from friend of the show, Daniel Marans of the Huffington Post. He's a great reporter over there. Let's bring Daniel in now, and he joins us now live via Skype. Dan, it's great to see you.
Great to be here. And what I learned pretty late last night is that the leaders of the Progressive Caucus, Congresspeople Pramila Jayapal and Mark Pocan, are at least going to try to sort of threaten Speaker Pelosi with the prospect of a defeat on the House floor by assembling the 18 votes they would need, assuming it's a party line vote, which I think we can definitely assume, and unless they get some changes that they want, and that would include federal direct guarantees of people's paychecks and some kind of a public health insurance expansion that goes beyond sort of the COBRA subsidy that is in the current version of the bill. Again, that's when people can keep their employer insurance. This would have added a government picking up the tab for employees' shares. And they plan to do that ideally by reaching out to members of the Congressional Black, Hispanic, and Asian caucuses, sometimes called the Tri-Caucus. And I think what's sort of interesting about all of this is that a lot of people on the left have been pushing the Progressive Caucus to act as a bloc to try to be more cohesive, be more aggressive, and leverage their weight in a way that's more similar to what the conservative House Freedom Caucus did to Republican leadership during the years of the Republican majority there. We'll see if they actually go through with it.
I have been one of those people, Daniel.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Let's be clear.
I mean, let's dive into this. Do you think they'll actually do it, Daniel? I mean, in terms of margining, in terms of ginning up support, active support on the floor for such a measure, it just seems, pretty pretty out of step for them, given that they've gone along at every single step in this process. What do you think?
I think that if they try it and fail, it will still be a step in a positive direction for them in the sense that they lack credibility with certain elements of the activist base and frankly with people like us in the media. And so, look, they do have a problem, which is that, of a progressive caucus of more than 95 people, you have maybe a dozen on a good day who are genuinely interested in challenging leadership. You think of the squad, Ro Khanna, maybe Jayapal and Pocan themselves, maybe Chuy Garcia in Chicago. I can count a few others. But then you have figures like Barbara Lee, Jan Schakowsky, Jamie Raskin, even in Maryland, people who are very sort of progressive in their viewpoints, but very rarely break from leadership. And the way leadership does this, and this is true in state houses, this is true on the Republican side of the aisle, is you give individual members things they can appreciate, whether it's a promising spot in, on the track to leadership, maybe a tiny carve out or an amendment, and that in effect saps the appetite for more collective action. I'd also add one thing that was really interesting here. Normally, there have been outside groups sort of pushing the Progressive Caucus to go hard. In this case, you had Congresswoman Jayapal, sort of vocally speaking up against Pelosi on a conference call and going hard against her in the press and sort of mobilizing this strategy. And you have a coalition of outside groups, including Indivisible, Move On, a handful of others, ranging from mainstream liberal to kind of far left, who are like, this bill's great. And so there was either a lack of communication from Jayapal's office to these outside groups or going in the other direction. But there are two pieces to the puzzle here. It needs to be an inside-outside strategy, again, as it I think typically is on the conservative side with groups like Americans for Prosperity.
That is so interesting. And what do you make of the fact, let's be honest, the stakes are very low in this bill.
Right.
The Senate is not even negotiating with the House Democrats. The White House is not particularly interested in doing anything. This bill is not going to pass the Senate. It is purely a messaging bill. It's purely to send a signal of what your ideal program would be. So why, when the stakes are so low, do you think that Pelosi and House leadership really made a point of leaving off the table some of these key progressive priorities?
And I should say also including some basically giveaways for special interests, things like allowing trade associations that represent corporations who may already be getting bailout money to receive small business loans, right? So these are things that are very controversial. There's no provision blocking corporate mergers, which again, these corporations are getting massive amounts of money from the government, and we're at a time of unprecedented corporate consolidation. That was something that antitrust experts had been pushing for, and they're one of the rare contingents that have spoken out against the bill. So it's both what's excluded and also what's included, ironically. But look, I haven't done deep reporting into sort of the speaker's motives, but I can tell you what my experience has been with Democratic House leadership in general and their thinking. I suspect that they were thinking if they do some kind of a Medicare insurance expansion, for example, that they would be maybe putting Joe Biden in a position where they could be outflanking him to the left. I think that they frankly were probably protecting their rank and file members' need for corporate PAC money and individual executive money. And, you know, in terms of the payroll guarantee thing, that was supposedly something where House Ways and Means Chairman Richie Neal preferred this sort of Rube Goldberg style tax credit system. And, you know, he is the #1 recipient of corporate cash in the House. He's facing a progressive primary challenge on September 1st in Massachusetts, in Western Mass. He's one of the rare members of Congress who hasn't signed on to the Disclose Act, which would increase transparency for corporate donations. So for some people, this is just genuinely what they believe. And then finally, I think Speaker Pelosi, in my opinion, and again, I can't cite to you reams of evidence here, but in my opinion, more than any one policy goal, she is thoroughly committed to denying progressives independent style power in the House. I think that it gets her goat, this idea that she came into the House in the late 80s as one of the most liberal members. Who are they to call me a liberal? And I think that when moderates play hardball, she can sort of just justify accommodating them on the grounds that they were the majority makers. And that's sort of what she's fallen back on.
Yeah, well, fascinating reporting, Dan. Thanks for keeping us updated. And we'll see what happens tomorrow. I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for anything courageous. Thank you, sir.
Daniel. Great analysis. And we'll have more Rising for you after this.